So much stuff
Hello,
on
everybody.
Twitter.
What'd you say?
There's so much stuff on Twitter. I'm sitting here scrolling through Twitter and it's already showtime.
Yeah. This, by the way, yes. So those joining us live get to hear this special part. If you just listen to the podcast, you don't hear this little special repartee behind the scenes, insider's look. Although the podcast listeners, I wanted to point out, Corey, they get to hear the music that our producer Kate selects for the podcast as the open. That's reason alone to tune into the audio podcast, is to see what music Kate selects. Yeah.
Is it like music that Kate created, or is it just kind of stuff that is it anything that I would understand or know, or is it just kind of random sound?
No, it's generally
heard it.
It's generally very sophisticated jazz that makes you feel like you have like a martini maybe in the 1940s or something, and something like that.
Yeah, the only people that are listening to our podcast are the people with the martinis. Can't handle the two of us at the same time without a drink.
Oh my goodness. All right. You tell me when you want me to do the clean end. Are we ready? You want to start? Or we're gonna
we are.
Give people time.
People are climbing in. I think we have a good amount of people already, and we ramble for a long time anyway, so we might as well. Yeah, we
ramble
get
anyway.
Started.
Welcome everyone to Random Assignment. This is a YouTube and Twitter and Facebook live stream, as well as an audio podcast. You can tune in on any place the finer audio podcasts are found, like Apple and Google and Stitcher and all those things. I'm Bob Bowden from Choice Media. You can find us on the web and through our free smartphone app. I'm joined, as always, by the juggernaut of education reform, the young phenom, as we call him, the great Corey DeAngelis. Corey of Reason Foundation. Corey, you appeared actually on a video with the great John Stossel this week, didn't you?
Yeah, I don't know how that happened. I was lucky enough for him to come across some of my work, and it's pretty good timing with all the homeschooling stuff going on. I think it's one of John Stossel's first or only videos on homeschooling, and it's about how everybody's kind of getting a taste of homeschooling right now. So yeah,
let me just say quickly, his original 2020 piece called Stupid in America was one of the seminal forces in the space of media about education reform. It might have been, there were many other important predecessors in terms of policy writing before that, everything from Milton Friedman's proposal of school vouchers to A Nation at Risk in the 1980s. But that Stossel piece on 2020, I think, probably was seen by more eyeballs than maybe any other piece on education policy ever, probably including Waiting for Superman or The Cartel. That 2020 piece on Stossel. And so for a long time, whenever I see John, I kind of tell him, like, I've been long living on his coattails as the poor man's John Stossel. So anyway, I have a lot of affinity for his work and not just education, but in all kinds of issues.
Yeah, the video just came out, I want to say yesterday, and it's gotten at least I think around 200,000 views on Facebook and maybe around 100,000 views on YouTube already. But here it is. I'll play it. So our listeners who haven't seen it already.
An excerpt.
A part of it, yes.
Yes.
Now she's not just mom, she's teacher too.
This pandemic's changing life for parents.
Millions of parents are sudden homeschool teachers.
Well, most just assist their kids' former teachers who now Zoom.
Hi guys, how's everybody doing?
Though not every teacher will use the internet. The Los Angeles Teachers Union got a special contract that says teachers are not required to use video conferencing. So the pandemic has had another side effect.
Parents and guardians forced into full-time homeschooling.
Listening to the media, you'd think that's a terrible thing that will set back a generation of children.
The longer these shutdowns last, the more students will fall behind and the harder it will be to get them back where they need to be.
But in fact,
the evidence overwhelmingly shows that children who are homeschooled get much better academic and social results than kids in government schools.
Education researcher Corey DeAngelis points out that even the homeschooling families are more likely to be poor.
Homeschoolers score about 30% higher on the SAT test than kids in regular schools.
They also do better in college, and they're less likely to drink or do drugs.
Mass homeschooling during this pandemic may actually be a blessing in disguise.
Up the Hell.
Awesome.
Some parents and kids are discovering new ways to educate. In Kentucky,
All right, yeah,
There he is.
we got through my part, so we could turn it off at that point.
Right. Look at those same newspaper articles behind your head that we random assignment viewers are used to seeing have now been, made famous by John Stossel. And so just quickly on, so he's talking about homeschooling, but in a way he's kind of talking about online learning mixed with homeschooling, right?
Yeah, he's talking about how children at home could be learning a lot more during the pandemic because they're essentially homeschooling. But yeah, I mean, he doesn't really get into a lot of the nuance about how, this could be classified as government schooling at home or home education in general or virtual education or virtual charter school education. So, I mean, it's only like a 5-minute video, so we didn't really get into those particulars. But either way, it really focuses and highlights on how a lot of families are seeing that, their kids are learning a lot more at a fraction of the time, whatever you want to call it, online learning, charter school learning,
Sure.
virtual learning or homeschooling, and that their kids are, feeling a lot happier and more interested in what they're doing because the education is actually being driven by the student.
Just a quick thing, I have a niece who just graduated from college. This is when she was a girl, she was homeschooled her whole career until then high school. She went to a brick and mortar. But, back then, if you're going back 15 years ago or so, homeschooling was more about an actual mom or dad sitting with a kid with textbooks, and a lot of times those parents had to be pretty good students themselves. They had the ability to teach algebra and teach biology and teach world history and English. And, so that was, I think, daunting to some parents. Whereas nowadays, and this is a point I probably make too often, but the online tools have grown so vast and so good. You don't need to be a content expert in any area to be a parent who's successfully proctoring an online education model. And that's what's happening in America, of course, right now.
Yeah. And that's, what we go over in the video as well, that we have so much access to free online materials to where the parent doesn't really have to be the expert, right? You have experts that you can reach at places like Khan Academy or TED Ed or other we have so much information on the internet right now that we really don't have to be the expert. But then also we can also seek out expert opinions to help us with different, math or reading or any type of subject. We don't have to be the experts ourselves. And then what I've also been pointing out to people is, there's a rise in hybrid homeschooling and microschooling as well. So you can a lot of people say, well, can't homeschool if I'm a single parent or if I want to have two incomes. But if you do like a hybrid homeschooling scenario, you could homeschool full time, not full time, but a couple of days out of the week, and then send the kid to a brick and mortar school for the rest of the time. So you kind of do like a mixed version, but then also like a micro schooling idea, which I think is one of the best ideas, to get 5 or 10 students together in a home, and you can still go to work, but they're being educated in essentially a small micro private school. But it's kind of like a homeschool scenario in that it's really one-on-one.
Sure. Like our friend Kelly Smith with the Prenda school model out of Arizona, and Choice Media did a video on that on YouTube. And I know you've also interviewed him. And so, yeah, that's great. All right. So I wanted to get to another idea, which is something that I'm calling fully funded school choice. And I'm using a hashtag. And I know people are clamoring for behind the scenes tidbits, Corey, on how things happen here. And so a little clue to when I get really excited about something, I'll just give the viewers this if I get behind the scenes clue, when I get really excited for something, it doesn't even happen that often. Maybe once a year, not even. Maybe once every 3 years. You know that because I find a poster, like I use a poster board. So I got a poster board this time. This shows how excited I am. It's showing there you go. Right, blow it up. Yeah, I know. You got to blow it up. So why? What am I excited about? Okay, I want to just quickly take people through this thing called fully funded school choice by first showing a story from today's Choice Media Newswire. It came from the Hartford Courant out of Connecticut, and it's about basically a breakdown between a public-private partnership. There was a billionaire who named Ron Dalio, as you see there, who had gotten together with the state of Connecticut to form this new coalition to make schools better in Connecticut, right? And so, the state was going to give $100 million, and the Dalio Foundation is now saying they are still going to give $100 million. So that's basically the amount they're in for. And this all kind of collapsed. And without getting into the kind of gossip of the person was hired, then they were going to be fired, and there's all this infighting about whether they were fired legitimately or not. Well, the bottom line is, you have a story here of a billionaire with $100 million check ready to write to improve public education. Okay.
Well,
now,
let's
if you
do it. Take the
add
money.
to that, right? Okay. So there we go. That's a starting, but that's from today. That's from today. Now it all fell apart, but they're still going to give money, $100 million, this billionaire. Go to a few days before, and we have a story about Jack Dorsey of Twitter, who's going to give $10 million to Oakland public schools because they're going to, I guess, have a tech equality initiative, whatever that is. But he's writing a check for $10 million, okay? And a lot of people remember that back in the day, Newark Public Schools got $100 million check from Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook. And so that was, about, I think, 8 years ago or so. Many say that money basically disappeared, $100 million given to Newark Public Schools. The bottom line is there are large donors, large foundations, and billionaires writing big checks. So what I have decided to propose is, why not do, for the first time ever, a trial where you have fully funded school choice, meaning you give every student in a district, you could pick a district, it could be small to medium size, it could be low income to a middle income district. You just pick one in America of whatever size and demographics that make sense, and you offer every single family 100% of the funding they would get if they were stayed in the district schools for 13 years, K through 12. And they don't have to take it. If they want to stay in the district, no problem. You can stay in the district. If you want to take that same amount of money as an education savings account and use it for private school tuition, use it for online learning, use it to foster these micro schools to which you refer, Corey, whatever. You could save some for college. The traditional education savings account idea that started in Arizona and is now in a few other states. But the difference is, this would be 100% of the funding that goes into K through 12 district schools. It has never been done before. Every form of school choice that has ever existed in America. We have 45 states with charter schools. We have tax credit scholarship programs in Florida and Pennsylvania. We have voucher programs statewide in Indiana.
They get like half the amount.
They get a fraction of the amount. The charter schools, some of them get 75% of the amount. This has never happened to give 100% of the money to every family. They don't have to take it. They can stay where they are if they want. But you offer them that 100%, and it is every student. So there's no eligibility thing. There's no, only the smart kids are getting it, or only a certain kind of kid. Maybe only low-income kids get it. You just give it to everybody, and that would be the model for this. And I'll tell you one other thing. You can tell how excited I am, right? Even detractors of school choice, even the worst detractors, those people say, pardon?
They could have it too.
Right. No, but even those people say they can't even criticize this idea, because even they say, oh, well, I'm just against government money going to private schools or to religious schools. As long as it's private money, even they don't criticize the Obama family for sending their daughters to an expensive private school in D.C. Even all of those people, almost all, maybe there's one out there, crazy person, but almost everyone is fine with private money paying for private school tuition. So this would not even, at least if they're going to stay consistent, it shouldn't trigger the rancor of those school choice opponents because it's completely private. But what would it do? For the first time, everybody could see not just the test scores, what happens with the happiness rates, what happens with the graduation rates. Compare the crime statistics or the teenage pregnancy statistics or the just depression statistic, or all kinds of metrics of successful student outcomes. And you could say, gee, how many people are like celebrating this idea? How many people are like, like if you go interview the people who then took this option, like how many of them go back to the district after 1 or 2 years of private school, or how many is it the opposite? They stay in the district, and then after 1 or 2 years, they're like, actually, we're going to take that private ESA. So this has never been done. Every analysis of school choice, Corey, you have done these things. You've been the champion of messaging the studies showing the effectiveness of school choice in America. And yet none of those studies, because it's never are really accurate, in my opinion, because it's never been tried at 100% funding. And if essentially funding to private, if a school choice program like a voucher is a financial instrument, it's measured in dollars. That's what a voucher is. It's a financial instrument. And yet that financial level is lower than the competition, meaning the district schools. It's not a level playing field. You can't even compare. Yeah. You can't compare private to district school performance if one is funded here and the other's funded down there. So this is my idea. I got a hashtag and everything, Corey. I want some billionaire to see this and write a check to try it. You could pick a district, and it's not that impossible. So I did a little spreadsheet. It's not the most complicated spreadsheet in the world, but it basically says, okay, what would this look like? You probably would need a pretty small district to do it. But let's say you had something like 200 kids.
Here we go.
Well, there you go. Let's say you're in a place with $13,000 as the district school spending. You have 13 years for K through 12. A particular billionaire selecting that district would have to write a check for $34,000. $34 million. Put it in escrow. And then now we just showed you people writing $100 million checks. Right. Yep. So we could have a funder write a $34 million check and try this for the first time in American history.
Let's do it. I'm in. Yeah, it's still private money. You'll still have people whine about, we lost enrollment counts, so we got to have an enrollment freeze or something. So I mean,
look, it's private money. It's private money. Too bad. I
think it's too bad too.
Districts adjust their fixed costs all the time. There are all kinds of reasons enrollment drops and increases all the time. So if a district consolidates 2 high schools into one or something, whatever it is, those kinds of decisions are made every day. This is myth that enrollment in a district is somehow flat until some sort of school choice is the thing that upsets the apple cart. In fact, if you really wanted to do what you said, Corey, you could pick a district that's rapidly growing, with the kids in the trailers outside because there's not enough room and not enough space in the buildings. Pick one of those districts. That takes that argument away. If we're a district that's overcrowded. So
yeah, so we should do a district. We should have them do a district that has 575 students, because then that would still be less than the 100 million that they were planning to spend anyway.
Sure. There are districts all over the country that come to mind. If I did this, I wouldn't even pick a chronically failing, terrible district. I would pick kind of a middle income and middle performance district, and because I would want it to be most applicable to the most number of people. I would want everyone to see what happens when you actually use the same amount of dollars effectively. It's the same money already being spent in the district schools. You would take the same amount of money it's just already being spent today. It's as if, people would end up with these college funds. Imagine they go to some Catholic school and they spend half on their K through 12 that the district spends. They end up with this giant 6-figure college fund at the end of all this. You realize how many people would be wanting into that deal? It's the same amount of money we're already spending. It would just be a way to show better use of those dollars.
Yeah, and you're completely right that the existing studies are not apples to apples comparisons. Even when they're random assignment studies, even when they're extremely rigorous, you're comparing, a system that is getting half or even less of the amount of money and getting similar or better outcomes. And so I always like to point to the most recent experiment on this, the DC evaluation, or the experimental evaluation, the DC voucher program. The kids in DC public schools or government schools get about $30,000 per year. That's a lot of money. And the average voucher amount is only around a third of that. It's only around $10,000 per student. Yet they found that the kids who randomly won the lottery to get a voucher to attend a private school in DC in the most recent evaluation had no better or no worse math or reading test scores, but they reported higher levels of safety, satisfaction, and then also they're more likely to show up each day. So they had better attendance rates. And so you're getting, a much better outcome for a third of the cost. But just imagine what the DC evaluation would have found giving them $30,000 per child. And
the infuriating thing is the people that the defenders of the Diane Raviches of the world, the establishmentarian defenders and apologists will say things like very well. They'll say things like, "Oh, well, these school choice programs don't even perform better than the district public schools."
Yep.
And they leave out the fact that the district schools have so much more money. Same with the charter studies. The
charters get like 2/3 of the amount of funding, or 3/4 of the amount of funding that the government-run schools do, according to my most
75%. Yeah. So you look at the Credo study. That not even the Credo study, which is generally, I think, shows charters work. They don't even mention this funding disparity that I'm referring to right now.
No, of course not. They pretend.
Right.
Yeah, they pretend that it's. And this reminds me of a quote from Diane Ravitch from 2016. I'm sure you remember this one, where she says something along the lines like, no voucher study has ever found positive effects of school choice. Here it is. I pulled it up really quickly. But Diane Ravitch in 2016, before any of the negative experiments came out, said that no voucher study anywhere has ever shown academic gains. And then she even listed Milwaukee and DC, which both Milwaukee and DC found positive effects, or at least marginally positive effects on math or reading test scores.
And graduation rates too, in Milwaukee. Huge.
3 to 4% increase in graduation rates in Milwaukee by the time that she said this. So she knew this information was out. And then in DC, they found a 21 percentage point increase in likelihood of graduation. And that was an experiment, but that didn't stop her from saying that there hasn't been any positive effect. And that also reminds me of
But to a larger point, no mention of the funding disparity. Just it's as if that's not even relevant. Anyway, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Well, yeah, Bob Pianta, the UVA, the dean of the University of Virginia's Curry School of Education, he had a recent article in Newsweek, which, sorry, I'm pulling it up as we're talking about this, just because I'm kind of thinking about it. And he echoed Diane Ravitch's claim and said something along the lines of, there's no evidence that. I'll just pull it up really quick. Do I have my window shared already?
I'm seeing you right now.
Anyway, he says something along the lines of, there's no evidence that private schools are superior to the government schools. Yeah. And again, same point. First, it's just not true. There, I pulled it up really quickly. There's no support for the notion that private or parochial schools are superior to what I would call government schools. And that's just not true. And this was in 2019. 10 of the 16 experimental studies find statistically significant positive effects on test scores. The evidence is even more positive for non-test score outcomes. And what Diane Ravitch and Bob Pianta are saying makes it really easy to refute their argument, because they're pretty much saying there's zero positive studies. And all you got to really do is pick one. We have tons. It's not just one of positive effects of school choice programs. Yes.
Around the time of that Diane Ravitch quote you gave, Barack Obama was interviewed on Fox News Channel, and he said just what Ravitch said. Maybe he got it from her or something, but he was Bill O'Reilly was interviewing Barack Obama, and Obama said, and Bill O'Reilly asked about private school choice and vouchers, and President Obama said, there is no evidence that voucher kids do better. He said that straight up. So we made a video then where we went to Paul Peterson of Harvard, who talked about his New York City study that showed voucher kids outperform. And then we went to Patrick Wolf of the University of Arkansas, who talked about his studies in DC. And so anyway.
That also reminds
But the point is, none of that ever talks about the money disparity. And that's what I wanted to talk about today.
Well, and this also reminds me of, remember during one of the early Democratic debates for president, when Julian Castro was still in the race, he said something similar. It is a myth that charter schools are better than public schools. And it's like, well, from the evidence we have, charter schools get better test scores, and they, have higher rates of graduation. And also, the students tend to, there's a couple of studies finding that they're less likely to, have teenage pregnancies and less likely to be engaged in criminal activity.
I know we're getting into the regular straight up religion here. But as a mentor told me when I was first in this space, as a mentor, Dan Gaby told me when I was first in this space, he's like, there's all this data and all these metrics and all these studies, but just look at which school the parents are lining up for. And there's a waiting list, and look at the schools parents are trying to get out of. And that's all you need to know. That's all you need to know. Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, people's choices shouldn't be restricted by what the science says. But I mean, the worst part is our choices are restricted, even though the science says that people actually do a good job when you allow them to choose their schools. So why don't we just allow them to choose their schools? But I've always made the case, and I made this case with Chris Stewart yesterday or a couple days ago, that our rights to choose our kids' schools should not hinge on what the academic studies say. But
so anyway, that's the regular religion. But before we move on, I just wanted to show this again. Maybe I'll keep it around.
Blow it up.
Yeah, right. Just for next time or something. But listen, these checks are out there. In fact, I emailed the Dalio Foundation to say, you've got this $100 million now, and the Connecticut thing fell apart. Here's an idea. I don't know if they'll take me up on it or not, but this could happen. You could be, if you run a large foundation, or you are a billionaire, or you're advising someone like that, you could do this for the first time ever in American history. Try this. Let 100% of the funding flow to parents who choose to opt out.
And you know what? This also sounds like a good idea, Bob, because when you're in the school, the education policy debates, whenever you hear the words fully funded, you think we're calling to like double the spending that we're
No, I do mock that. Yes. Normally the unions use the term fully funded to mean 5 or 10% over what's being spent now. That's the operative definition. Yeah. Fully funded always means more. 10% more. Whatever. Yeah, that's what fully funded is. But yes, I'm using it in a different way.
Yeah, so 15,000, what we're spending in the government schools today in the U.S. So 15,000 sounds like a good deal for a privately funded school choice program. Because when people in the education space hear those words, they may be thinking you're calling for $30,000 per student. So I mean, I think you'll be able to convince some people with that, maybe.
All right. So anyway, let's move on. You have a homeschooling update, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody knows we've been talking about Elizabeth Bartholet's article in the Arizona Law Review. Calling for a presumptive ban on homeschooling. We've been talking about this for weeks.
We got to get you and Elizabeth Bartholet together, man. I know we don't really have guests on this podcast, but that would be one I would take in 2 seconds.
Well, I don't believe she would be up for discussing these things with me. We can ask her.
All right, I'll call her.
Yeah, we should call her. Yeah. But I mean, I've heard from other journalists that she hasn't been responding. I can't tell you who said that, obviously, but. Yeah, I mean, we're having so many updates here just because things keep changing. But for a long time, since that Risk of Homeschooling article came out, she kind of went silent for a while until a couple of days ago, the Harvard Gazette
struck back, as they say.
Yes, exactly. She came back swinging. There was tons of public pushback against the ridiculous idea that parents should have to prove their worthiness to academic elites or government bureaucrats to be able to educate their own children in their own homes. There's tons of pushback, and she was silent for a while. And a lot of people were thinking, well, maybe she realized that her idea was so horrible and her scholarship was so horrible. But this full-length interview came out.
Yeah, I'm sure that was it. Yeah, soul-searching change of heart.
Maybe she did, but obviously not, because this full-length interview came out from the Harvard Gazette. And this is the third article since since her Arizona Law Review article calling for the ban came out. This is the third Harvard affiliated article that came out. But this one is special in that the other two were alumni papers and, student newspapers. This is the official media arm of Harvard University. But so it's not just like a student newspaper, but so this is actually Harvard giving her a platform as well. And I've always said that they should have saved the characters here and called it what it is and just called it a war on homeschooling. They could have deleted the NING because she, comes out swinging in this interview again. And, she starts out with her anti-conservative, anti-Christian fear-mongering, as she does in her other articles.
Sure.
She hints at this idea that parents are just trying to abuse their children in the homes. She tries to, hide any evidence of these things happening in government schools, and essentially just,
I like the line. They want to exempt their kids from exposure to.
Yeah, and it gets worse. I mean, I thought her ideas were pretty ridiculous and far out there when her full-length article came out and her Risk of Homeschooling article came out in Harvard Magazine. But she said a couple of things in this interview that I thought was super strange. And she says something in here. She essentially says that there's effectively a right to abuse your children, and if you're a homeschooler. Yeah, here's the line. She says, effectively, there's a right to abuse your child and not to educate your child, just as long as you homeschool. So if you're a homeschooler, it's absolutely within your current rights to abuse your children and to just not give them any form of education. Oh, come on. Yeah. Nobody believes that. You're making yourself look ridiculous. She's trying to, again, fear monger. And this is dishonest to me. I mean, I'm sure she can make an argument around using the word effectively because she's talking about there's not a lot of regulations and stuff. But there's no right to abuse your child. No one's arguing for a right to abuse your child. No one's arguing that you shouldn't be able to educate your child either. So I thought I like
the line, and a right to not educate your child, considering that 20% of American kids don't finish high school, and another 20% are functionally illiterate even when they do finish high school with a high school diploma. So yes, not educate your child sounds like 40% of the district school enrollees to me.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. So, I mean, a lot of this is repeating what she said before, but I thought something, I mean, the NAEP results, the Nation's Report Card results, we already talked about this, but those just came out and found that 3 out of every 4 kids were not proficient in civics or geography. Only 15% were proficient in U.S. history, and we're in the U.S. right now. Just imagine what world history looks like.
Corey, you're giving this lady too much shine. I think you're giving her too much attention, man. Come on, is this she? Maybe. You're shooting down. Is she worth all this time?
I mean, she's a Harvard law professor, and if she was just saying these ridiculous ideas, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But look, she even explicitly calls for reforms. She's calling to have a presumptive ban on homeschooling. So yes, we should push back against this, and you can say I'm elevating it, but I mean, I think it's good to elevate bad ideas too, so people could see how ridiculous the ideas are. Otherwise, we're just kind of in an
echo chamber or something.
Yeah,
we should talk about the other side.
We should talk about the other side. And what's also interesting though is this whole time she said that, I'm just calling for a presumptive ban. And I've always said that's bad enough, right? Because presumptive ban is, it turns around the idea that we're all innocent until proven guilty, and it makes us all guilty until proven innocent. And it instead of having the government prove to us why they should be able to take away our kids, she wants us to prove to the government why we should be able to have our own kids and to educate our own kids in the household. That's completely backwards.
It sounds so sophisticated if it's a presumptive ban, doesn't it? That's an elitist kind of term. I mean, like, let's say we have a presumptive ban on her ability to publish ideas. What if we just have a presumptive ban on that? Like, that would be,
But check this out. So she even in this interview says, well, I wouldn't ban all homeschooling. Look, it's a presumptive ban. It's not a real ban.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But then she says, even if I deem you worthy of educating your own kids, if you have a legitimate reason to do so, and maybe your kid's a super athlete, but even if you're able to demonstrate your worthiness to me, I still think that even after I grant, in her words, after parents are granted permission to homeschool, I, Elizabeth Bartholet, would still require that your kids participate in at least some school courses and extracurricular activities. So, of course, homeschoolers are already doing these things and participating in extracurricular activities. But I would define this as an outright ban because she's requiring still, even if she deems the parents worthy and fit of educating their own kids and not abusing their kids, She's still saying, well, you still got to do some schooling,
Yes.
at least some school course. That's a ban on homeschooling.
I would feel better about it if she had some sort of a throne and a scepter and some sort of robe and maybe some bugle players with the flags hanging off the end of the long bugles or something, where you would walk up to her to ask for permission to homeschool and she would hear you, to the extent she saw fit, something like that. I would feel better about that.
So 2 more quick updates on Harvard so we don't give it too much time. I'll try to do it really quick. But I noticed something from her 80-page law review article attacking homeschooling, but she also has a whole page on private school reform, and most people didn't realize this. But she goes, she doesn't call for it explicitly, but she, in a sense, calls for or hints at a private school ban altogether, which, of course, is completely ridiculous. It's even worse than just a homeschooling ban, because even with the homeschooling ban, at least you could, pick a private school. But look, she goes on and says, private schools have a lot of the same problems as homeschools. They could be religious. And then what I also thought was scary or, concerning in the least is that this sentence, she says, it would be deeply unfair to allow those who can afford private schools to isolate their children from quote unquote public values, whatever those are, in private schools reflecting the parents' values, while denying this possibility to those unable to afford such schools. So you could look at this and say, well, maybe she's calling for vouchers.
No,
but she's not.
No, she almost contradicts herself. She says, it's terrible to not expose your kids to these great public school values, but then at the same time, you're denying this terrible thing to those without the ability to homeschool.
Why would they want to?
It doesn't make sense to me, but
that she says, there's these public values in public schools, which that's just her values. It's just more like to be her values that are reflected in the public schools, since she's using so much anti-conservative, anti-Christian fear-mongering. It seems like this is the case, that she wants to force everybody to have a government school education, so they can all be exposed.
Is that it, or is there more on her?
One more thing.
All right.
Someone that I know started a petition on change.org to get Harvard Law School to host a debate, because look, we've had the anti-homeschooling propaganda conference that she, put together that actually got canceled because, in their words, it's because of COVID-19. We had the pro-homeschooling panel with myself and 6 other individuals that made the case for homeschooling. But I think, we should have a debate with both parties. And so we already have 918 supporters who have signed this petition. We'll see if Harvard Law School actually does anything with that. I doubt they will, but who knows?
Yeah,
but that's the end of
it's our side who wants to debate these things publicly much more than the establishment, right? They're not too into that usually.
Absolutely, but let's move on from Harvard, since we've been using so much time on it. I'm sorry for taking up so much time and so many weeks.
I'm giving you grief. It's good for the viewers to see us.
The next topic is super interesting, and when you sent this to me, I didn't even know what the heck was going on, and I didn't even know that this was happening.
Oh my gosh, the Hoosier State, everybody. That's Indiana, for those who don't know. And I don't know, Corey and gentle viewers and listeners, you probably heard of this idea of participation trophies before. It's the idea where, kids go to school. Like when I was a kid, you'd have like a field day, right? And you'd compete in different events. It could be the, 50-yard dash or whatever we had, something like that. There'd be like what they call the winner, right? So that would be like, that'd be the winner, and then you could come in second, and you get like a little ribbon for that. You get come in third, you get a little ribbon. We had ribbons. I had them for years, like these stupid ribbons from elementary. But anyways, at the time it was fun. But I came in second in one of the things. Participation trophies means everybody wins, because it's too sad, Corey. If everyone doesn't win, then it's it hurts their feelings to not win all the time. And so this idea says we should give kids. Everyone who participates gets like the same trophy. Well, they've moved this concept, as I like to say, expanded this concept to every teacher in Indiana. All teachers. Breaking news, everybody, from the Indianapolis Star. All teachers recognized as Indiana's teacher. Teacher of the year.
I thought this was The Onion or Babylon Bee, man. When you said this to me, I was like, there's no way. Is this April 1st?
Yeah. I know. They're all. First, I thought, is this one district? All teachers, maybe in some tiny, quirky little district who did it as kind of a stunt. No, it's the whole state. The whole state has named every teacher the teacher of the year because, after all, I mean, they're kind of paid all without respect to their job performance. So I guess that's part of the culture, right? You can't pay them anymore if they're good, or in most places anyway, or pay them any less if they're not good. They have to all be paid the same. Why not just call them all, why not just evaluate? In other words, for many years it was alleged, the evaluations are fake. Alleged. It's pretty obvious if you ask me. But the establishment would push back. Oh, no, that's not true. Teacher tenure doesn't protect all teachers from accountability. It's just due process. That's all teacher tenure is. Oh, my God. If you really doubted whether teacher evaluation was a scam, this headline answers that question.
Yeah, that's 65,000 teachers in Indiana.
Oh, that's great. Do they all get a trophy? That'd be great if they all got a... Huh?
Bob, can I be school choice supporter of the year? How about no? How about we're all school choice supporters of the year? Yeah.
It has to be everybody. Yeah,
we're all education researchers of the year and education, people of the year. Why is it just teachers? Why is it just teachers? Why can't we be think tankers of the year or something like that?
Yeah, they're actually discriminating now. They come to think of it. Yeah. All right. Anyway, so there's not much more to that story in terms of depth, but it's funny.
Yeah, so I think we should hit on a little bit of what's going on in New York City. I want to pull up the tweet first that Mayor Bill de Blasio was bragging about shutting down a yeshiva Jewish school. This was just a couple of days ago, and I saw this tweet, and I was like, oh, man. He got ratioed pretty hard. You can see there's a lot of likes. There's like 5,000 likes. But for those of you who are not well-versed in Twitter, oh, look, there's my tweet as well. But there's a term called getting ratioed in Twitter. And the meaning of that, I guess we can have a lesson in Twitter, whatever today.
Twitter metrics. You're the one to give a lesson because you're so good at it.
If your replies, in general, this isn't always the case, but if your replies exceed the number of your either retweets or particularly your likes, that's called getting ratioed. It means you probably said something pretty stupid, because it means that a lot of people are replying to you. As you can see, I participated in ratioing Mayor Bill de Blasio, but his original tweet, he was bragging about shutting down the yeshiva school, and he claims that there are as many as 70 children in the class. That could mean that there's one or two. It would still be true as if there was 5 kids, because maybe
I think zero is also included. Zero is
you can have negative kids in the classroom.
Yeah, but we're laughing. This is a serious matter because, and our friend Jason Bedrick has been a champion on this issue, whatever, on this ongoing subject matter. But the mayor basically says, if we find them, we'll shut them down. They won't come back, I assure you, because if we have to shut down the building itself, we will. But I've heard a lot of reports, but there's been very few instances where there was actually evidence, the mayor said in an interview on the radio. So they basically have, look, the First Amendment has a term called peaceably assemble as a protected right in the First Amendment. The fact that we now have governors who have unilaterally said you cannot assemble because I'm a governor and I just call it an executive order that, that's a school, and these up to 70 kids or whatever have gotten together, and that's against either a city, a mayoral order or a governor's executive order. You're in violation of the law that I just made up and that was passed by no legislature, and that contradicts the First Amendment peaceably assemble phrase because that's a right you have until I just decided it wasn't. And so we're going to send the police. We're going to send the police to basically violate your constitutional rights for assembly. That's in the First Amendment. I mean, if you want to repeal the First Amendment, that would be, you could do that. You could try to do that legally. If you want to have a constitutional convention and have a new form of government, you could do that legally. But if we have this government with this constitution that says in the First Amendment, the words peaceably assemble is a right, and you have governors and mayors just issuing executive orders to just say, you know what, I'm not feeling this whole peaceably assemble right.
Well, and it looks like he's discriminating against, a particular religious group. I mean, we had a lot of, at least on Liberty Twitter, libertarians were pointing out that he's been, picking on the Jewish community. I mean, you can
Yeah,
see
that's-
this
that's
tweet as
a
well.
puzzling
And so
coincidence, isn't
I
it?
think that's also why people were replying so much, because he singled out the Jewish community. And then also his tweet said something along the lines of, these are our kids. And it's like, well, they're not your kids.
Yeah.
Kind of the same idea that, the kids belong to the government. They don't actually, they're not their own beings, essentially.
Right.
So yeah, that was a big, thing going on. And
Okay, so let's move on from that. The big story there was a big story from Politico, I think it was, yes, about Trump's push to reopen schools. And they did some surveys and polls showing it's getting a chilly reception from voters. This was, I guess, our lead story at Choice Media's website today. And when it first saw it, I thought to myself, like, is this out of virus fear, or is this out of actually homeschooling is making my kid happier because they're not getting bullied and ridiculed and being dealt drugs every day or something? Like I'm just riffing here, but maybe is this about the popularity of online learning and homeschooling, or is this about fear of coronavirus and COVID-19? I mean, I don't know. And
it's probably both, right? It's probably both. I mean, a lot of people, and it depends on the individual too. I mean, a lot of families are probably having a really tough time, with the adapting to home education. So a lot of
let me just, it's important to get to the number. I'm sorry. 41% of Americans said it was a bad idea to reopen K through 12 schools in the fall. It was about a survey of 2,000 registered voters. 44% felt it was a bad idea to open daycare centers. About a third of the voters think it's a good idea for children to resume in-person classes or go back to child's kids. So if a third, we'll call that 33% says resume in-person classes, and they're saying 41% say that's a bad idea. Well, 41 to 33 is not a huge difference. Also, too, a stat I heard that I thought was interesting is that in the age range of children that would be at a K through 12 school, the fatality rate of the regular flu is higher than the fatality rate of coronavirus for kids of that age. So there's that. And then,
what also factors into this is what we talked about last week when we were sharing the videos with, all of the schools opening up in other countries and pictures from places like France where the kids were playing in the little, squares all by themselves. They had their own assigned squares. So like there's no socialization essentially happening in these schools, which we see why they're doing it. They want to prevent any COVID-19 stuff. And so they're, spreading out the desks 6 feet apart, even though, a lot of people are saying that that's probably not going to do a lot of good because, it's spread through the air. And if you're in the same classroom, even if you're 6 feet apart, it could still be spread, whether you're like 3 or 6 feet apart with the desks, if you're indoors. But yeah, I think a lot of people are seeing that, look, this school doesn't really look really fun. And maybe my kid doesn't want to be in that environment. Maybe I don't want my kid in that environment where they're not even getting to socialize on the playground. They're not getting to really do anything fun in school.
Yeah.
And, maybe that's why we don't want schools to reopen, because we're seeing these videos from Canada, China, and places like France.
Although I guess you could say this is an although, it's somewhat leaning the other way, but the LA Times, Corey, you have a survey about parents and what they say about online learning.
Yeah, so Los Angeles Times just came out with an article. The coronavirus keeping campuses closed. Parents report academic, financial struggles, and stress.
Yeah, they also say in the story, they say fewer than half of the parents say distance learning has been successful. Now that's distance learning as run by the LAUSD, where, as your John Stossel piece pointed out, the teachers union got this agreement where they don't have to do any online video if they don't want to, the teachers. And they also had an agreement that teachers would have no negative personnel evaluations during this semester. And I'm not sure if LA is also one of the districts where all the kids get A's no matter what they do. I think San Francisco was that. But so when you see something like, distance learning, fewer than half say it's been successful in LA. You're like, I wonder how successful it is when you tell all the kids, by the way, you're going to get an A no matter what you do. Hope you log in anyway. And you tell the teachers you don't have to have an online class, but I hope you decide to have an online class if you feel like it. Oh, wow. It turns out it's not been that successful in LA. I can't believe this.
Yeah, a parent just messaged me the other day. I don't remember what state he was from, but he sent me his child's report card that he had before the schools had actually closed. And it was all like 97 up to 100, it was super high grades. And he's like, these policies of, giving everybody a good grade or just doing pass fail are harming kids like mine that are trying to get into a good college and get the best, class rank, where, they busted their butt at the beginning of the year. And now it's essentially, they're being treated as if they were getting D's, and why did they put in all that work at the beginning of the year? That doesn't seem very fair.
It's not training the students to be a superb performer unless they're going to be an Indiana teacher later and all get Teacher of the Year awards, in which case it doesn't matter if they're a stellar performer. But I'm trolling. But also on polling, so our friends at AFC had a new national poll. 40% of families more likely to homeschool after lockdown ends. Tommy Schultz there putting that out, and that's a big number. 40% more likely to homeschool. Now, you say more likely, I guess that includes, so you wonder how many. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, they just asked the parents, hey, are you more or less likely to homeschool after all this? And 40, actually, they keep saying 40% with the headlines, but it was 40.8%. So I'd like to round it to 41%. So 41% of families said they were more likely to homeschool. And I think about 30% said that they were less likely to homeschool. And then the rest were unsure. Again, of course, there's
still
some
a big
families.
Number.
Yeah, the difference is large in relative terms in favor of homeschooling. But even if it was like 44, even if it was 50-50, the people that weren't homeschooling anyway. So even if it was like quote unquote tie, that would still be a big shift to the system if anyone switches, right?
Yeah, no. And again, sometimes what they're calling homeschooling may be when districts are doing online learning badly that we've talked about so much. And to them, that's also homeschooling. So maybe there are some that are walking away thinking homeschooling is not very effective because it's a district running it. And the district isn't a Connections Academy or K-12 or Florida Virtual or some entity that's gotten really good at this. They are people that are kind of phoning it in.
And what's interesting here is we're getting a lot of new data points. At first, we just had the data point from EdChoice saying that 52% of parents said that they had a more favorable view of homeschooling as a result of COVID-19, whereas only 26% said they had a less favorable view of homeschooling as a result of COVID-19. That was essentially all we had for a long time. Now we're seeing this from AFC. 40% of families say that they're more likely to homeschool after the lockdown. We have my unscientific poll showing that, out of the people who responded to my survey, 1,330 respondents, 15% of them who did send their kid to a traditional public school or government school before the lockdown said they're going to send them to a homeschool environment. So that indicates a big change. And then, the discussion with Kelly Smith from Prenda, he said he saw a 21% increase in demand recently for his micro schools in Arizona and elsewhere. So I think all of these numbers, none of them by themselves are, perfect estimates, especially because people's feelings are changing over time about all of this homeschooling stuff going on, virtual schooling.
Yes.
But they're all pointing in the same direction, indicating that it seems like there's going to be a big change in at least the near term, unless there's a huge change of heart, between now and when schools open up in the next year or so.
And some of the most fun stuff we do on this show, Corey, is stuff about indoctrination in the traditional public schools, the government schools, the term that you have pretty much sold worldwide is now, I'm starting to use it all the time, government schools.
Well, it's the right word.
Sometimes. Huh?
It's the right word.
Yeah. You convinced me. Sometimes these government schools, maybe like one in South Carolina, I don't know, they can get a little where they're like almost kind of opinionated, where they're telling the kids to believe certain political ideas instead of others.
There it is. Not exactly telling them to believe, but it seems like there's some political indoctrination going on in this school in South Carolina. It's a government-run school in South Carolina. It's a high school in a quote-unquote, history, the parent said something like a Constitution class, which is pretty interesting.
Nothing wrong with a Constitution class. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, but if you're imagine how they're teaching the Constitution if they're getting this stuff wrong. Maybe they're teaching the Constitution as like a living, breathing document that you can just interpret it however you want, instead of how the founders interpreted it. But
for those of us just listening on the audio podcast version, Corey just pulled up a photo that's taken at a school in South Carolina. I guess it wasn't taken yesterday. It's from a little bit ago. But the photo says, "What are you?" ? From Roget's Thesaurus, liberal. And they offer a definition of liberal as tolerant, generous, enlightened, broad-minded, lavish, charitable. Antonym is conservative, and conservative is defined on this poster as stingy, miserly, regressive, narrow-minded, reactionary, bigoted, prejudiced, and biased. That's the definition of conservative according to this. Is there a chance that maybe a student made this, and this is one student's opinion, though, Corey? I'm just trying to put that out.
There was a news story on this, and I can share it in the comments with the viewers in a second. I can't pull it up. I don't have the hyperlink with me right now, but the local news actually ran a story on this, and I in my tweet blow it up and show. This is from a PowerPoint. Which looks like it's from the teachers about, this is where the students are going to take their notes. And I also have a screenshot of the father himself, Keith DuBose, on Facebook talking about this and how this was from his son. And it was shared, about 900 times at the time that this photo was taken from this parent in South Carolina. And then also, there's an official news story on it in the local news that has never been taken down in the past, few months since it's been up.
As I always like to say, Corey,
go ahead. Which I'm just saying,
if this were a thing where it was like Obama is Satan and all that, we would be just as against that. We're not, we're not taking a side politically here and on, the liberal conservative. It's just shocking. You only see it in one direction in the traditional government schools. When it's the teacher anyway. It seems to always be this direction. But I would oppose it if it was just as anti-Obama.
And I think one of my friends, it might have been Tom Bogle in Arizona. I think he shared on his Facebook one time where one of the lessons plans, had something that seemed to be biased in favor of Trump. And I came out and shared, that and said, look, this is biased in favor of Trump. They were saying something about, it was like an economics lesson, and it was like biased towards his, tariffs, which most economists, almost unanimously agree that tariffs are the equivalent of shooting yourself in the foot. And this assignment didn't really seem to get into the nuance of both sides of that argument. So
unless they're used to lower the other people's tariffs to then negotiate lower for both sides. So you could raise yours if the other side has higher tariffs first. You could raise yours theoretically to then negotiate both sides to go down. So that's the other side to that. But
I don't want to get into it. I would argue that even if the other side does, even if the other side doesn't do anything and still taxes you and levies tariffs on your goods, it's still a bad idea to issue tariffs against them because it makes goods and services from other countries more expensive for your consumers. The only benefit of a tariff is the domestic producers of a good or service. But we don't need.
You would agree if the net result. Well, if the net result would be to if actually you did get the other side to lower their tariff because you had raised yours, and let's say I could guarantee you that a later negotiation would then have both sides lower tariffs from what had been the starting point, you would agree that would be a good thing.
Yeah. That would be better if it would be best if nobody had tariffs and both sides, didn't charge each other so that consumers on both sides could get a good deal. But but this particular instance didn't really get into that, and it just made it seem like tariffs were always a good thing. And so I called that out on social media too. And you're right, it does seem to be mostly in favor of the left, but it is possible for a rural, perhaps, government-run school in a red state, perhaps maybe it's biased in favor of the right. And I think people should call that as well, those things as well. And that's, again, just another argument for school choice. Indoctrination can happen both ways. And I would encourage any of my followers to share with me any indoctrination that they see that goes towards the conservative side, because quite frankly, I do share a lot of indoctrination that seems to be going in favor of the, and of the left in the government schools. But I would be more than happy to share, the opposite. It's just I don't get that much information going the other way.
As my former heroes, Click and Clack of the Tappet brothers of the show Car Talk on NPR used to say, sorry, but that's it. You've wasted yet another hour of your valuable time. In this case, watching or listening to the Random Assignment program. Corey, you have any final words for our listeners and viewers?
Thanks for listening to us, and we'll be back next week. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of your comments today, but I'll go scroll through these after we pop out and feature some of the comments either way.
Yes. Okay. See you next time, everybody.